Diplomat's Archives, Hidden Stories. This is the 9th story. Today's story begins with these two paintings seen here. This one was painted by Lee Jong-woo, and this one was painted by Na Hye-seok. There's one thing these two have in common. They were the first Korean artists to study abroad in France. That's right. Today on Diplomat's Archives Hidden Stories, we're going to talk about the very first Koreans who studied abroad in France over 100 years ago. To find out more about this, we decided to visit the French embassy in Seoul.
Hi, my name is Pierre Morcos. I'm cultural counselor at the French embassy and also director of the French Cultural Institute. So when I heard that I was appointed as cultural counselor here in Seoul, I've read a lot about Franco-Korean relations, shared history, and I came across quite quickly on those two figures, Lee Jong-woo and Na Hye-seok, because they are quite unique figures as the first Korean artists to come to France, to work there and to mingle with French artists and the French artistic scene. And I was really struck first by their desire to first master the Western techniques, but blend them also with Korean aesthetics. And I think that approach is very interesting. And I was also very moved by their personal journeys.
Lee Jong-woo, who arrived in Paris in 1925, was the very first Korean artist to study in France. Then, in 1927, Na Hye-seok arrived in Paris, becoming the second Korean and first woman ever to study art in France. Born in 1899 in Hwanghae-do, Lee Jong-woo entered Pyongyang High School in 1913. There, he learned watercolor painting from a Japanese art teacher. One day, while painting at Moranbong, he saw the renowned Japanese artist Takagi Haisui painting the same scene in oils. He was captivated by the thick paint and textures of Western painting. At this point, we became curious. When was Western-style painting introduced to Korea? Although Western-style painting had been introduced to Joseon before, it truly took root during the late Joseon period. In the 1880s, Joseon established formal diplomatic ties with Western nations, opening the door to Western art movements and culture. Korean painting uses mulberry paper and focuses on brush lines and empty space, while Western painting uses oil on canvas, focusing on color, depth, and volume. The characteristics of Western painting, which is very different from Korean art, may have left a strong impression on Lee Jong-woo. In 1923, Lee Jong-woo graduated from Tokyo Art University and returned to Korea, teaching art at Jungang High School in Seoul. And in 1925, he finally went to study abroad in Paris. Our team visited the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art to learn more about Korean artists who studied abroad in France at that time. Currently, the museum is hosting a special exhibition titled Highlights of Korean Contemporary Art as part of its special collection showcase. And here, you can also find works by Chung-woo and Na Hye-seok, who are known as the first Korean artists to study art in France. And we decided to learn more about these artists with the curator who organized this exhibition.
이종우 선생님 같은 경우에는 1899년에 태어나셔서 일본 동경미술학교에서 서양화를 배우고 돌아오셨습니다. 이분 이전에도 서양화를 배우고 온 사람들이 많이 있었지만 대부분 이제 서양화를 계속하지 못하고 접었어요. 그런데 이종우 선생님은 이후에도 계속해서 서양화 작업을 하셨고 특히 프랑스로 직접 유학을 가셨습니다. 이전에 다른 분들은 주로 이제 일본에서 서양화를 배워왔지만 이분은 본토에서 배우겠다 이런 목표를 가지고 프랑스 파리에 가서 직접 미술을 배우기도 하고 거기서 살롱 도톤느라고 하는 대회에 출품을 해서 수상을 하기도 했던 만큼 현지에서 직접 작품으로 활동을 모색했던 분입니다.
In fact, it was in the 1920s that Koreans became interested in studying abroad in earnest. At that time, Korea was under Japanese colonial rule, and the main study abroad destinations were Japan and the US.
이전의 작가들은 일본 미술을 통해서 서양 미술을 배웠기 때문에 한번 이렇게 굴절된 형태의 정보를 습득했다면 프랑스 현지에서 직접 벌어지는 장면들을 목도하고 당시의 그 예술가들의 분위기를 알게 됨으로써 서양 미술을 그 자리에서 직접 습득했다는 게 있고요. 돌아와서 발표를 했을 때도 많은 작가들이나 젊은 세대들이 일본을 통한 작품이 아니라 이제 원고장의 작품이라는 점에서 많이 열광하고 또 경도되어서 작품들을 많이 감상하는 일이 벌어졌었고.
After arriving in Paris, Lee Jong-woo received neoclassical art training centered on drawing. Neoclassicism was an art movement that spread widely across Europe, particularly in France, from the mid-18th to the early 19th century. It is characterized by strict, balanced structures, clear outlines, and a perfection of the three-dimensional form. Then, in 1927, he exhibited 2 works at the Salon and became the first Korean to receive an award. Established in 1903, the Salon was an art exhibition showcasing the works of young and progressive artists and served as their debut platform. In 1905, Henri Matisse and his peers also exhibited at the Salon d'Automne. At that time, critics mocked the artists as wild beasts, thus giving their movement the name by which it became known, Fauvism. As such, the Salon became a stage for young, innovative artists to lead new art movements. Against this backdrop, Lee Jong-woo's award at the time holds great significance.
I think at that time, so in the 20s, 30s, France and especially Paris was considered as the global capital of the arts, and major and famous foreign artists came to France at that time to experience that quite unique moment and scene. And for instance, very famous artists like Pablo Picasso, Modigliani, Marc Chagall came to Paris to have that experience. And for those artists who lived under Japanese colonial rule, I think choosing France was really important for them to be in a space where they could freely dialogue with those French artists and global artists and to freely experiment their arts.
Lee Jong-woo spent 3 years in Paris creating many works. Shall we take a look at some of his pieces from that time? His works from Paris are generally regarded as having strong form, based on precise drawing, realistic depiction, and balanced use of color. Lee Jong-woo, the first Korean artist to study in France, was followed by none other than Korea's first female Western-style painter, Na Hye-seok, who also studied art in France. In 1913, Na Hye-seok went to study at the Tokyo Women's Arts College and graduated in 1918. After returning to Korea, she held her first solo exhibition in 1921. On the very first day of her exhibition, over 1,000 visitors came, and out of the 70 or so works on display, more than 20 were sold at high prices. This shows just how much attention Na Hye-seok was receiving from the public at the time. Na Hye-seok was not only Korea's first female Western-style painter, but is also known as one of Korea's first-generation feminists. She consistently published essays on women's rights and wrote novels criticizing the patriarchal society, believing that when women speak and write, the world can change.
Look, men of Joseon, you Joseon men are truly strange. Whether you're worthy or not, you keep concubines and second wives, yet you demand chastity from women. But women are human too. We are beings who can be swayed by sudden emotions and make mistakes just like anyone else. Before I am a wife to my husband, before I am a mother to my child, first and foremost, I am a person.
She was quite a leading figure, the first female Korean artist, a professional artist, and she was quite also a feminist figure, and she really set an example for the next generations. So I was very struck by her commitment and involvement as a female artist.
In 1927, Na Hye-seok had an extraordinary opportunity for the time. She traveled around the world for a year and a half, accompanying her husband, who was a Japanese government diplomat. And during her travels, she stayed in Paris for 8 months. Interestingly, there are some records that one of the people who welcomed Na Hye-seok upon her arrival in Paris and even helped organize a reception in her honor was none other than Lee Jong-woo, who had arrived in Paris earlier to study. In Paris, she lived in the home of Félicien Chalais, an Asian studies scholar and philosophy professor. Chalais was also a prominent intellectual who supported Korea's independence movement through the French-Korean Friendship Society. The photos you're looking at now were taken at the home of Chalais, where Na Hye-seok stayed while living in France. They show Chalais' family, as well as Na Hye-seok and her husband Kim Woo-young together. These photos were first made public in 2019, and the person who introduced these photos, kept by Chalais' granddaughter to the world, is
저는 한경미라고 하고요. 제가 프랑스 파리에 온 지 지금 35년이 넘었어요.
Han Kyung-mi, who came to France to study French literature, says she became deeply fascinated with Na Hye-seok after discovering the complete works of Na Hye-seok by chance in 2004.
나혜석 작가가 1927년에서 28년에 유럽 일주를 해서 그 기록을 남기신 게 있더라고요. 그래갖고 딱 보니까 르 베지네라고 파리 근교에 있는 르 베지네에서 샬레라는 사람 집에 살았대요. 그래서 야 이거 재밌겠다. 그래서 그 두 가지만 갖고 제가 그 르 베지네 이렇게 전화를 한 거예요. 그래서 혹시 거기 27년에 샬레라는 사람이 살았는데 거기 후손을 찾아볼 수 있을까? 그 집을 찾고 싶다. 이렇게 연락이 된 거죠.
After much effort, she was able to meet one of Chalais' grandsons, but in the photos that he had, she could not find Na Hye-seok.
2019년에 한겨레 기자분님 한 분이 오셔서 여기 프랑스와 관련된 여러 가지 이제 그 기사를 적으려고 근데 그분을 동반해서 샬레 분 손녀 되시는 분 저쪽 남쪽에 사시는 발랑스에 사시는 분 있는데 거기를 제가 동반을 한 거예요. 근데 가서 그분한테도 제가 혹시 27년, 28년 가족 사진첩이 있느냐 그랬더니 자기 엄마한테 자기가 물려받은 게 있다는 거예요. 그래서 보여달라고 그래서 딱 봤는데 나혜석 사진이 딱 있는 거예요.
The 4 photos discovered by Han Kyung-mi were donated to the Suwon Museum of Art, located in Na Hye-seok's hometown of Suwon. As Han Kyung-mi learned more about Na Hye-seok, she grew deeply empathetic toward her. In 2012, she even made a docu-fiction film titled Na Hye-seok in Paris, depicting Na Hye-seok's life in Paris.
Alors que mon mari est parti à Berlin pour ses études de droit, je préfère rester à Paris pour me perfectionner dans l'art de peindre. Tous les jours, je fréquente à l'Académie Hanson de Montparnasse l'atelier de Bissière. Certes, j'étais une peintre assez connue en Corée. Cependant, au début, avec quel désespoir ai-je découvert l'immense talent des maîtres dont je suis allée voir les expositions. Face à cela, mon maigre talent me paraît dérisoire.
While staying at Chalet's home, Na Hye-seok studied painting for several months in the studio of the Fauvist painter Roger Bissière. Self-portrait. It is known to have been created by Na Hye-seok during her stay in Paris. When you look at this painting, you can notice that the dark tones of the background, clothing, and hair create a heavy and somber atmosphere. And the woman's melancholic, lonely expression further deepens the subdued mood of the painting. Due to the Western facial features, there has been debate over whether this painting is truly Na Hye-seok's self-portrait. However, regardless of who the subject is, the work is widely regarded as a powerful reflection of the artist's psychological state. During her stay in Paris, Na Hye-seok was inspired by Fauvism, known for its bold brushstrokes and vibrant use of color. You can also see one of Na Hye-seok's works on display at the Highlights of Korean Contemporary Art, currently being held at the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art. It's this painting, Peonies of Hwaryeongjeon Palace. Red peonies bloom with a sense of passion across a wide green field. And the vivid contrast between red and green, along with the energetic brushstrokes, brings the scene to life.
화령전 작약 같은 경우에는 나혜석이 이혼 후 수원 친정에 머물던 시기에 그린 작품으로서 집 근처에 있었던 수원성에 있는 그 한 부분을 그린 작품인데요. 나혜석의 초기 작품들이 대부분 화재로 유실되어서 볼 수가 없는 경우가 많습니다. 이 화령전 작약은 화령전의 모습과 그 앞에 흐드러지게 핀 작약꽃을 볼 수 있는 작품으로서 작가의 실제 작품을 볼 수 있는 드문 유작 중의 하나입니다.
Born in 1896 until her death in 1948, Na Hye-seok lived in a time when Korean women faced many restrictions and discrimination under a patriarchal society. Through her free life in Paris, we can assume that Na Hye-seok drew great inspiration not only artistically but also in advancing women's rights.
나혜석 작가가 그랬어요. 파리로 가고 싶다. 자유의 나라로 내가 갈 수 있으면 뭐 얼마나 좋을까 이런 식으로 얘기를 하셨는데 저는 너무나 아쉬운 게 나혜석 작가가 파리로 오셨어야 했어요. 그 옛날에 6개월 된 막내를 시어머니한테 맡기고 왔던 용기로 프랑스에 왔더라면 좀 더 뭔가 더 나은 화가가 돼서 세계 무대에서 튀지 않으셨을까. 저는 그 생각을 계속해요.
Lee Jong-woo, who arrived in France in 1925, and Na Hye-seok, who followed in 1927, are symbolic figures of the first artistic exchange between Korea and France. There's also such a figure in the field of architecture. His name is Kim Chung-up. What kind of connection did Kim Chung-up have with France?
He's an important figure among the experts of the architectural scene because he has very strong ties with France. As you may know, after studying in Japan, he came to France to work for 3 years in the cabinet of Le Corbusier, who is most probably the most famous French modern architect. And he really worked deeply with this architect in major projects like the Palace of Shangri-La in India, and he had a huge impact also on Corbusier work.
After completing his architectural studies in Japan, he returned to Korea in 1944 and worked as an architect. In 1947, he was appointed assistant professor in the Department of Architecture at Seoul National University's College of Engineering. But in 1950, the Korean War broke out, and Kim Chung-up evacuated to Busan with his family. While in Busan, Kim Chung-up was given the opportunity to participate in the first International Conference of Artists held in Venice, organized by UNESCO. And it was there that Kim Chung-up met someone who would have a profound impact on the course of his life. Le Corbusier, often called the father of modernist architecture, he is considered one of the most influential architects of the 20th century. The meeting with Le Corbusier in Venice led Kim Chung-up to stay in Paris from October 1952 to December 1955, working alongside the world-renowned architect Le Corbusier in his atelier. Thus, Kim Chung-up became Le Corbusier's only Korean disciple. What did it mean to work with Le Corbusier back then? To learn more about Kim Chung-up's connection with France and Le Corbusier, our team reached out to an expert.
저는 한양대학교 예과 캠퍼스에서 건축 역사와 이론을 가르치고 있는 정인하 교수라고 합니다. 르 코르비제는 1950년대, 60년대 미스 반데로에라는 건축가와 함께 세계 건축계를 양분하고 있었습니다. 그만큼 중요한 건축가고요. 그리고 르 코르비제 사무실의 직원이 10명에서 12명 정도였습니다. 인원수가 작기 때문에 일단 거기에 들어가는 자체가 굉장히 힘들고요. 르 코르비제 자신이 재능에 대해서 확신이 없으면 뽑지를 않았습니다. 르 코르비제 사무실에 일하는 자체는 굉장히 큰 기회였고 모든 건축 지망생들이 동경하는 자리였습니다.
While working at Le Corbusier's office, Kim Chung-up participated in the Chandigarh project in Punjab, India. At the time, Le Corbusier was commissioned by the Indian government to design key administrative buildings for Chandigarh, which was planned as a new capital city. Starting with the floor plans for the administrative buildings, Kim Chung-up took part in creating the detailed drawings for the project. He later recalled that this experience was when he truly opened his eyes to architecture.
제가 생각하기에는 그게 단순히 건축 설계를 넘어서 거의 전인격적인 영향을 미쳤지 않나 그렇게 생각을 합니다. 김정우 선생은 중요한 결정을 내릴 때마다 아마도 르 코르비제를 자신에게 투사시켜서 판단을 내렸던 것 같아요. 1960년대 말에 군사 정권의 도시 정책에 대해서 많은 비판을 가하고 그 결과로 이제 1971년에 반강제적으로 이제 망명을 떠나게 됩니다. 이런 결정도 제가 생각하기에는 르 코르비제의 영향 아래 내렸던 판단이 아닌가 그렇게 생각을 하고 있고요. 김정우 선생님이 남기신 메모를 보면 계속해서 이제 이분 영향으로부터 벗어나야 된다는 그런 좀 강박이 있었다고 생각을 합니다. 제가 생각하기에는 김정은 선생의 본연의 모습을 찾아나가는 시기가 70년대 이후라고 생각을 하고 있고요. 그 시기는 이미 이제 르꼬르비제가 타계한 이후라고 그렇게 생각을 하고 있습니다. 그만큼 영향이 지대했다고 생각을 하고 있습니다.
Kim Chung-up returned to Korea in 1956 and established the Kim Chung-up Architectural Research Institute. Known as a leading figure of Korea's first generation of modern architects, he created landmark works in Korean architectural history. Among his many works, there's one especially significant piece symbolizing the relationship between Korea and France. It's here, the French Embassy in Seoul.
Revived our diplomatic relations in the 60s under the leadership of General de Gaulle, President of the Fifth Republic. And the ambassador of the time, Roger Chambard, really wanted to build a new French embassy here in this premise. And he selected Kim Chung-up, especially because he had connections with France. He was recommended by Le Corbusier himself. And he really wanted to blend the Western and Korean aesthetics. And his project was really interesting for the French ambassador. And when the embassy was built in 1962, the ambassador wrote to the foreign minister that his achievement was magnificent. And clearly, it is recognized as a landmark building for the French and Korean architects.
Located in Seodaemun-gu, Seoul, the French Embassy building, completed in 1962, is often regarded as Kim Chung-up's first major work that fully showcases his unique architectural style.
I tried hard to embody the spirit of Korea and express a French elegance. It was a labor of tears. It became a guiding light in my artistic world, and through it, I firmly took the first step as architect Kim Chung-up.
Well, I think it was seen as a really impressive achievement. As I said, it was an interesting and quite unique dialogue between Western aesthetics and Korean aesthetics in a time where there was a fascination in France about East Asian arts. So this building was very well received. It was considered as a major building, and it's still seen as one of the most beautiful embassies in our diplomatic network.
The Embassy of France in Seoul is praised as a perfect blend of Korean and Western architectural influences. The highlight of the building is its roof. It gently curves upward as if holding up the sky, reminiscent of the eaves of a traditional Korean hanok.
프랑스 대사관 같은 경우는 한국적 정체성과 관련해서 가장 중요한 건물로 그렇게 간주되고 있고요. 김정은 선생님이 한국에 귀국하셔서 굉장히 다양한 건물들을 설계를 하셨습니다. 그 중에서 제가 가장 중요한 특징으로 꼽을 수 있는 게 지붕이라고 그렇게 생각을 하고 있습니다. 르꼬르비제가 추구했던 지붕 형식과는 달리 김정은 선생은 한국의 전통적인 지붕선을 여기에 결합을 시켰습니다. 그래서 굉장히 독특한 형태의 지붕이 등장하고 있고, 이것이 이제 많은 작품들에서 변형된 형태로 나타나게 됩니다. 주한 프랑스 대사관 같은 경우는 두 가지 종류의 지붕이 있습니다. 한 가지는 장중하면서 이렇게 묵직한 그 대사 관저의 지붕이 있고요. 그다음에 또 다른 지붕은 사뿐히 하늘을 향해 솟아오르는 그런 대사 집무실의 지붕이 있습니다. 마치 우리나라 전통 건축이 그 불국사에서 비슷한 지붕 형태가 나오는데요. 자하문과 범영루에서도 유사한 지붕의 어떤 곡선미가 나타나고 있습니다. 그래서 전통적인 지붕의 형태를 현대적인 재료들, 콘크리트라는 재료를 가지고 새로운 형식 체계를 개척한 것이 제가 보기에는 김정은 선생의 가장 중요한 건축적 특징이다 그렇게 생각을 하고 있고요.
Completed in 1962, the Embassy of France in Seoul was designed by Kim Chung-up. However, as the number of embassy staff grew and additional space became necessary, the building underwent expansions that significantly changed its original appearance. The roof of the office building, which was the highlight of Kim Chung-up's design, was demolished, and as the building was expanded, its original form changed significantly. Then, in 2015, the French Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs announced the need to modernize the French embassy building in Seoul, considering the strengthened bilateral relationship. Following this, restoration and remodeling work on the embassy began. The main focus of the project was to restore the embassy office building based on Kim Chung-up's original design and to add 2 new buildings next to it. In 2023, the French embassy finally completed its restoration and remodeling. We could also meet with one of the architects involved in the project.
My name is Tae-hoon Yoon Tae-hoon. I'm a French Korean. I moved to France when I was 11 years old. And I studied architecture there. And I became architect and I have my own practice in Paris.
Architect Yoon Tae-hoon said that he spent a great deal of time researching Kim Chung-up's original design while working on the restoration and remodeling project.
So first, it was important to find the original aspect of a building. So we worked with the documents of Kim Chung-up Museum to find the original design of Kim Chung-up for this building. And we tried to have the contemporary design to be behind the building. So Kim Chung-up design is really bright. It's in concrete and it's white color. And our building is quite dark. And our building is behind his building. So we try to be quite discreet.
He also said that through studying Kim Chung-up and remodeling the French embassy, he came to appreciate the unique Korean characteristics present in Kim's architectural works.
I discovered the work of Kim Chung-up and also Korean culture. And it was very interesting for me to understand how Kim Chung-up, who also have studied in France, learned from Le Corbusier, and also try to deal with a Korean identity. I think Kim Chung-up is the father of modernity in Korea, and he learned with Le Corbusier, who is kind of father of modernism in architecture. He defined himself as architect and also as a poet. I think that's a very interesting way to imagine that architect is also an artist.
The first Korean art student who went to study abroad in France went to the country in 1925. And this year, 2025, marks the 100th anniversary. Since then, the relationship between Korea and France has continued to grow with increasing exchanges between the people of both countries. Just as many Korean artists once went to France to learn new things, gain experiences, and seek inspiration, today, many French artists are coming to Korea for the same reasons. In next week's Diplomat's Archives Hidden Stories, Korea and France, we'll meet some of them and hear their stories.
아직도 생생하게 기억해요.
So stay tuned for next week's episode.